Welcome back to TAO Talk. We dive into the weekly ebbs and flows of BitTensor. I'm your host, 563. This week, Brody's back. We're excited to be joined by David from Ready AI. How's it going, guys? Thanks for hopping on, David.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you guys.
Great to see you again, David. Glad to be back for this episode. I was in an undisclosed location south of the border, touching a lot of grass, even some waves. And I sat for about 6 to 7 days thinking about BitTensor the entire time, just thinking about BitTensor. And then I got bored, so I came back to talk about BitTensor. So glad to be back, and I'm glad to have you back as the one that I get to talk to first.
It's a very healthy way to spend your vacation, man.
Yeah, I mean, though your vacation seemed to tank market, so I don't know if we should let you go.
Yeah, well, we came back and changed everything around.
Yeah, hey, study the market price action from the moment I left to the moment I came back. First day I'm back, it's up 20%, everyone. Correlation is causation here.
Exactly. But yeah, I wanted to talk about like that whole decoupling, right? Because subnet prices haven't seemed to care, what's going on with the broader TradFi market. Like, I could bring up some stuff over on this side. We have, so TAO app, I love what the updates these guys are bringing out, but the sum of alpha prices is just going up and to the right relentlessly. So there's a lot of demand right now for everything that these subnets are doing. We see TAO on root is just steadily declining, while TAO on subnets is just up and up and up. Yeah, what do you guys make of this? Do you think this sustains? Is it possible to sustain at this level?
I think it's pretty interesting to see the coupling of TAO injected versus TAO reserves over the past week. That is, shout out to TAO app. I think this is by far the most insightful app for all things analytics. And one of the things that I want to work on more is actually writing and following some of these graphs more closely and interpreting these insights into kind of explainable, digestible, actionable insights for the broader ecosystem and for people who are still trying to figure out and navigate DTAO. But yeah, this is incredible. The updates are, and a lot of kind of nuggets of information and all this stuff in assumptions and takeaways.
Yeah, honestly, the root folks are still eating pretty good. Root APY is still around 20%. So I think everybody's really winning here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So, today I was just looking at sort of our root proportion on 33, which, is roughly the same as it is for everyone that launched at the beginning, though they're slightly different. So we're now at, 40% going to alpha holders. And, I think that's, obviously been a big number that's been followed, kind of this, when it crosses 50%, has been thought in a lot of people's minds to be a big tipping point for, money to kind of move off of a root and into subnets. I think we sort of expected that like somewhere around more of that, like the third, 33%, 35%, you would start to see that shift in advance. And to me, that seems to be a big part of what you're seeing with kind of the subnet prices. I also think that sort of the sum of subnet prices, love your guys' perspective on this, but I feel like, the sum of subnet prices being meaningfully over 1 is a really good sign that people are seeing value in subnet commodities, outside of just the future potential of BitTensor. It's really showing that there's value in what's being produced by, kind of the collective subnets.
Yeah, exactly. So if there's no outside pressure, right, you'd expect us to like steady state go around 1. But as you said, seems to be a lot of interest, even though the market seems kind of the broader market seems kind of crazy right now. Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, TAO's relative strength, we were talking about this before we hit the live button, but TAO's relative strength has been pretty crazy compared to the wider crypto alt markets. And I think that's, foreshadowing a much greater move. And I don't want to start to talk too much about price action, but it's very bullish signal when TAO is holding up relative to the rest of the market. And we've held pretty steady at the bottom of this range here, and I think we're going to start to see the catalysts begin to catalyze and in DTAO really live up to what it was intended to do. So really optimistic about where we are, despite all of the negative news, tariffs, macro stuff happening over the past few weeks. Granted, number one KOL in the world did tell us to buy, so maybe we all should have listened.
It's funny, man. But honestly, going back to the fundamentals here with what's going on with subnet registration costs, still a lot of demand just for the slots themselves, right? We're seeing new slots getting bought every day, every couple of days, keeping this registration cost between like 300 to 600 TAO. And we have to remember, these are burnt now. These aren't recycled. So this is just TAO going back into the system. Really cool to see. Sweet, man. But yeah, I want to go to our slides real quick. Let me bring this up. So we had, I think it's 13 different subnets are up over 50% over the past week. It's kind of hard to miss, like when so many things are going up to the right. Yeah, are you guys diving into the trading? I know, David, obviously you guys have a lot of work to do over on Subnet 33. How does just the volatility impact the day-to-day? I'm curious.
Yeah, we sort of, did a lot of modeling ahead of time of just what the early days of DTAO were going to mean, and sort of with low volatility, with root selling, with minor pressure. We sort of really kind of have focused on a few month sort of roadmap that we really started to execute on, very publicly kind of this month. Because now that you sort of have a lot of that clearing out of the root selling, you're sort of getting towards that 50% piece. I think you're now, in a much better, sort of more stable environment where, prices don't have that, very significant sort of downward pricing pressure on it. So, so we're really just trying to execute on our, kind of 90-day, kind of plan, which we can get into a bit more. But yeah, there's still quite a bit of volatility, but I think, as you said, a lot of it is more up and to the right, and over the last 45 days, it's been a lot more volatile and with downward pressure.
I am really curious to hear about that 90-day plan, if you wanted to get into that. And I think that if whoever's listening, whether you're your other subnet builder, I think you could probably take some, be beneficial for them to hear this advice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've also sort of taken a few different approaches, I think, from some of the overall market. I know there's been a lot of discussion about kind of miner rewards and emissions going out to miners and kind of issues around that in terms of price pressure. Again, I've sort of viewed a lot of that as more short, or sort of medium term and not long-term thinking. So, we've been really focused on building out a miner toolkit. We call it kind of our miner optimization toolkit, which we started releasing earlier this month. We now have kind of one-click miners for, every kind of GPU or CPU type that you could use. We're actually going to be rolling out kind of a one-click instance. We've seen a lot of activity across our Docker images now. We've had 100 plus downloads of that image just in the last 8 or 9 days since we released it. So we're really trying to make it as easy as possible, and want to broaden that miner base so we can really scale structured data outputs over the coming years. The other big thing that we've been focused on, which we launched our first partnership around just a week or so ago and rolled out an AI agent for, is with Common Crawl. So a big thing that we're trying to showcase is the power of structured data for real-time intelligent agents. We think real-time intelligent agents are sort of the future of where AI is going. That requires a couple components. So there's the kind of data scraping or kind of data aggregation piece. There are a couple subnets, including Subnet 13, where we're actually pulling in a number of those data sets and processing that as part of the structured data output from Subnet 33. And so we're going to be publishing a bit more on the data set side over the coming weeks as well. But with Common Crawl, we process 5,000 plus records of theirs. For people who don't know, Common Crawl is probably one of the most important companies in the open source AI space. So they they have the crawl of the web, the largest one that's kind of open and accessible for any of these large AI shops, OpenAI, Meta, all of them. This is the largest data source for their models, at least that they talk about publicly. And so with Common Crawl, we've now produced an AI where you're able to chat and get information via their website, in their Discord, in their organization Slack channel. So it's now a resource that they can utilize around that crawl and updates in real time as new information, new data publishes to that crawl. And all of that is in that processing sort of layer that we've created with Subnet 33. So raw data is great, but raw data, needs to be processed so you understand, is this a value sort of to add into my data set? If it's not a value to add into my data set, it's going to ultimately create a lot of problems for the accuracy and quality of that model. And so, and maybe we can go into this a little bit deeper as well. But now on our kind of jobs interface and via our API, you can do structured data tagging, you can do sentiment analysis, you can also do customized tagging for any sort of categorizations for model development. So we rolled out the Common Crawl agent, and we've actually been working for the last month or two with one of the largest creators in crypto, Twitter, on a partnership that we think will be like the most powerful AI agent kind of sort of yet released in this space. And that's going to be coming next month. So, dropping a little bit of, here, but that's
an alpha
for a little while. Alpha on alpha.
I'm checking this freaking subnet token price right now. Guys, you guys are all degenerates that listen to this. But no, so I'm curious to learn more about this miner optimization kit, because obviously there's a barrier of entry for people to become interested in mining, right? But when you lower the barrier of entry, you increase the amount of competition that comes in, which is obviously good. But it is also very difficult to kind of like take that base model and begin to iterate on top of it and make it better. So what's the kind of like the flow for somebody who's rather non-technical and they want to begin mining? Like how quickly is that earning opportunity evaporating?
Yeah,
like,
no, it's a great point. And what we're not able to do, right, is give them a model that's going to get them, printing money without any work. That's
Right.
not what the miner optimization toolkit is doing. But what we've found, and I think a lot of, sort of the miners, and, we have, people on our team who, have started as miners and BitTensor and sort of, joined us. There's just a lot of kind of getting up the curve of just launching these miners and, kind of the, documentation limitations, across kind of getting these things up and running. So we just want to make it as easy as possible for someone to come in, start running a test miner and, working and seeing how they can compete in our ecosystem. And so we just think dropping that barrier, we're also going to be rolling out some tools around like, earnings estimates and things like that. So they can have a better sense of, what they might actually be earning.
Nice.
The ability for them to compete in a very competitive environment, where we're consistently seeing miners, outperform benchmarks of GPT-4o and like kind of the top models on structured data outputs by, 50+%. There's some real competition there, but we also want to make sure we have as many miners as possible. I think one of the things when you sort of look closely at a lot of the subnets is, there's miner concentration. And I think it's important to, as a subnet owner, for us to bring in as many new miners into the ecosystem, make it as easy as possible.
100%.
So how flat is that incentivization curve then? Do you guys have like a thought on how competitive it should be to mine on 33?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty competitive. I mean, we have, I haven't looked sort of in the last day, but I mean, we're seeing, kind of, dozens of new UIDs, sort of every couple days coming in. And, we've kind of had a pretty sort of strong, I think, pretty strong incentive curve, for a while now. And, have gone through those growing pains, earlier on in terms of, ensuring that sort of that high quality tags are kind of matching with our incentive curves. But, we've seen really high quality results from the miners over, the last, number of months now.
Nice. Awesome, man. Well, let's dive in. We have a few fresh bloods, some new subnets that popped up this week. Want to talk and highlight Patrol over on 81. These guys were launched from the TAO.com team. Spun out as Tensora. These guys are working on like a specific data source for security. It's kind of like if you guys are familiar with Arkham, it's kind of the same vibe I'm getting. It's just like super data like labeled wallets and trying to find out identities, and it's really something that we need on BitTensor. It's remember when we had that hack back in the day. It took a while and it took a lot of resources to understand and trace those funds. So if we just have that data available, I think it's very powerful, and we can start from the BitTensor native data and then like expand from there. So I'm pretty excited about this one.
Yeah, agree. They're building a graph that'll allow us to track, all of these types of movements, kind of thinking of it as like Arkham intelligence specific to BitTensor. They're also they're going to eventually move to Solana and other chains as well, which will be cool. But this is something that's much needed on BitTensor specifically, because I don't think that like the tooling and the intelligence around BitTensor or I should say Subtensor is pretty limited. And until, like TAO Stats was kind of the only player in breaking down and showcasing a lot of these analytics in extrinsics and stuff. And now we've got TAO app and we've got TAO XYZ. So yeah, the more kind of indexing of the chain and unique and different ways we can get and wallets and stuff, the more we'll be able to kind of secure the network and prevent hacks and exploits. So I think this is really, really important.
And obviously a stacked team. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah. And then we also had staking over on subnet number 88. And these guys, it's trying to be like, it rewards you for finding successful staking strategies. So maximizing your staking rewards over a bunch of different subnets. It kind of reminds me, I know, Brody, we talked a little bit about this. Was it Alpha Trader Exchange? But I think it was by the Nickel 5 team. Kind of similar in that regard. Those guys are looking at like maximizing DTAO trades, and this one's more about staking rewards. So it's interesting, kind of crowdsourcing these strategies.
Yeah, or like Mentat mines or something.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like a competitive Mentat mines. I'm curious how this works in practice, though, because it kind of asks folks to give away their strategies. And I remember PTN ran into some of those issues early on. Like, how do you get folks to give away their signals when they can go and use their signals for themselves? You just have to make sure the juice is worth the squeeze, basically.
Yeah. David, what are some of the subnets that you think would be the coolest to come online here in the next few months?
To come online as in sort of new ideas or
new ideas.
We've been so sort of heads down focused on what we're building. I haven't really been thinking as much about new opportunities. I mean, with the explosion of new subnets, right? I mean, there's a couple, 2 or 3 a week joining. It feels like there's a lot of new interesting ideas. I mean, I think the Patrol one is super cool. Carrot's great. I'm excited for him to jump into the subnet world. But then I do feel like we're seeing some stuff that's pretty niche, and I don't know, I don't exactly know sort of how that, kind of scales to some of the broader ecosystem outside of BitTensor. I'm kind of curious to see how, how some of that plays out in terms of value across the network.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing that a lot of people are trying to figure out, right? Is like, what is the actual market opportunity here for some of these subnets? Is it okay to have a very niche use case that has a, kind of like a single modality, single type of application to it, or something that's more broad, like, subnet 4 or or 19 or shoots or whatever that are kind of just producing something that's much more raw, and even Ready AI in your case, something that's much more raw that you can kind of build composable modularity around the actual core intelligence that's being produced. So that's been a huge thing that I've been thinking about is how do you actually value the different approach? How do you actually plot those on a graph between niche use case, broad use case, and I think the general AI industry is still finding its footing with what is actually in demand from customers.
Yeah, and also sort of like, where is the value going to accrue, right? I mean, I think that's that's an important component here. I think to your, like you were saying, right, in the broader AI space, I think there's still questions as to where is value accrual? Is it, sort of in the foundation model developers? Is it actually going to materialize a little bit more in the app layer as it has historically? And we're seeing, some more of that kind of take off recently with the Cursors of the world and, sort of, some of the larger products that are built on top of the foundation models. And I think a big part that we as subnet owners need to prove out over the next bit here, and we're excited to be, a part of leading that way, is monetizing the commodity sort of off of BitTensor. So we have a number of, I think, really interesting partners that we're going to be kind of rolling stuff out with over the coming next kind of 60 to 90 days, and really looking to bring in groups that one, kind of draw a lot more attention to our ecosystem, which I still think we're in that kind of attention maximization phase of kind of the subnet valuations for the most part, but then really showcasing monetization off BitTensor.
Definitely, man. That's actually very relevant to one of this week's headlines. I wanted to talk about PTN. This Delta prop shop that's been built on top of Taoshi, it kind of just showcases that, right? They're using the signals that the PTN is generating to build applications. So I think that's right up that alley, right? It's where is that value being created? Because folks that hold that, I guess, theta token, in this case, the subnet 8 token, eventually the validators need to store more and more of that to be able to, gain access to that intelligence. And if you have a ton of apps pinging that same subnet, you just drive more and more value there.
Agree. The more miners, the merrier. The easier it is to kind of dip your toes into BitTensor, I think, is a net positive. It serves as a marketing microphone as well, with all these open source AI indie devs going to tell their friends, hey, here's an opportunity to make some money. We've got, I've got some miners deployed here. You should, join. And then it kind of just creates a domino effect. I think talking largely about just BitTensor marketing strategies, there's kind of a couple audiences you want to capture. It's you want to capture token holders and community members, but you also want to capture developers. And these people are really hard to market to because devs in general are just very particular about the stacks that they work with, the projects that they work with, the things that they spend time on, because there's an abundance of different things to do. So if you can make it at least easy for them to just come and start mining, then that's probably 90% of the battle, because then you get nerd sniped by stuff as a developer and you just start hacking away. If I just improve my model by 20%, I can start to earn 40% more, and that's worth the effort of investing time into. So I'm
Is
bullish
that a
all of these ways.
segue into
Is
miner
it?
optimization toolkit?
It might be. Not that I had the slides beforehand or anything. Not that I made the slides. Yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously, we're big believers in that. We want to make it, as easy and exciting for developers to come in. I think one sort of interesting thing I'm kind of curious, your guys' perspective on, but we sort of went from, some of the thinking around subnets and monetization, from being very like validator sort of centric. And I think what you're now seeing, kind of all of the subnets really do is take on kind of monetization themselves and really drive monetization via their controlled validator. But really, it's kind of subnet and their validator. So one actor really driving monetization today, versus there are multiple groups. And I think that does make sense. Like you have to showcase the value of your subnet, and start to roll out products that are going to monetize to encourage others to come in. But what do you think of that? Because I think that's been a pretty meaningful sort of shift in the ecosystem's thinking over the last handful of months.
Yeah, it's gone from the whole subnet token as a commodity to subnet as a business that generates profit that can eventually go back to buy and burn the token, kind of. So there is that shift there. And I think that's how subnet owners should be thinking about it, right? They should be thinking, how can we create businesses out of the value that's being generated on the subnet? I know that's like Tauchi's main goal is just to generate a ton of revenue so he can go back and buy the token. And that's like, honestly, it's one of the paths that a subnet owner should like legitimately think through. Like if it's not a pure R&D subnet, I think it should be thinking, what's the path to generating profit on our own?
Yeah.
What do you think, Brody?
I don't know. I have some opinions about the whole business model conversation and the whole verticalization of subnets, which is kind of a different topic. One of my main concerns
that is sort of in line with what we're talking. I mean, I'm curious your thoughts on that, because I do think that is a little bit more of what's happening here is sort of a verticalization. And I've chatted with some other subnets about, okay, we might do buyback and burns, but we really want to focus on people who are validating, kind of with us, right? Which is a little bit more true to kind of the validator as the one monetizing the output versus, sort of the subnet owner. So I just think there's some interesting discussions happening around, how that monetization should accrue value to the token.
Or it could accrue value to builders on your network, right? If other builders are coming on and using that intelligence, you could incentivize that too. It doesn't necessarily have to be incentivizing the token holders themselves, right? But I mean, token price going up is very good marketing as well. So there's a couple ways you can think about it.
Right.
Cool. I wanted to touch on social tensor because there's this whole rebrand social tensor to Zuzu, and then they just launched this new subnet over in their slot on 28 called Nuance. And this is kind of like a Kaido on the blockchain, or a kind of like Kaido on BitTensor, where they have this list of a ton of verified accounts, and you get you basically mine by contributing to a conversation, contributing something meaningful to a conversation. Just a very interesting way to incentivize real discourse. And it's just more than anything, it's a very interesting experiment that I'm looking forward to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back to the phrase crypto incentivizes max creativity and AI enables max creativity. So, you want to spend your time in something that is aligned with both of those, and BitTensor is kind of the ultimate manifestation of that. And this is cool. I mean, a lot of these experiments will fail, and I'm not saying this particular experiment will fail, but I'm saying most of them will fail, but at least you are incentivized to come up with the most creative experiment. And this is something that's definitely very creative. If the Kato has had, killer launch and it's sustained its killer growth because of a lot of the different ways to incentivize people to participate in their apps and their products. So this is something that could potentially work really well, and I'm excited to kind of see what happens.
Yeah, and if anyone could do it, it's probably these guys. You've definitely seen the make it a quote tag everywhere over on Twitter, and it's from Social Tensor. So these guys understand virality. I think this is one to watch over on 28. Really cool.
Sweet.
And for this week's head-to-head, this is where we look at a couple of the subnets that are facing off against each other. I wanted to look back at the deep research type of subnet. So we have 68 and 25. Obviously, that's Nova from MetaNova Labs and Protein Folding, now called Mainframe from Macrocosmos over on 25. And these guys have been kind of duking it out, but MetaNova seems to have taken the lead. I'm curious if you guys think this is the novelty pump going into novelty search this week. Do you think that's always going to be a factor? This whole novelty search, like pump ahead of the novelty search call on Thursdays?
Probably.
Attention drives like price action.
Probably. Well, yeah. I mean, it's been the case for the past 8 weeks. So I wonder who's doing it. We need Deep Patrol to start indexing the wallets who are the culprits of all of this pump and dump action.
It's something to keep in mind, though. So if you hold some subnet that's about to go novelty search and then it pumps, and you're like, is that sustainable?
Pump and dump subnet. I think you got
who's building it?
Is that what are we on? 89? Is that
89? We tried that. They already tried LOL.
Yeah.
I mean to actually monitor pump and dumps, monitor wallets.
Monitor pump and dumps.
Yeah. No, I mean I think there's definitely some stuff going on like that, kind of around novelty, around tweets and things. So I'm
sure there's a bot that just watches Const's tweets and searches for the subnets and trades those. There's got to be one. Do you think this marketing game is worth playing for a lot of these subnets, right? Like trying to get their voice out there now that it's all market driven?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, who do you think is how would you approach that from a subnet side of it, though, David? I know, obviously marketing has changed a lot post TAO. I'm just curious if you guys planned ahead for that, or if you're now wondering how that changes the game.
Yeah, no, I think, marketing, I mean, we definitely, saw that was going to change dramatically with TAO. To sort of put it bluntly, right, you were sort of marketing to, a dozen validators more directly, kind of pre-TAO, right? You did some of that publicly, but by and large, you were sort of trying to have conversations with validators, keeping them up to date. That all has shifted to where all of that needs to be public. We tried to be a little bit thoughtful, as I was saying, about the first 30 days, because I was a little nervous about getting too many people sort of excited about what we were doing. And then they're down, because of root selling and stuff. So we sort of think we've moved out of that phase. And that's why we've really started to hit the gas on marketing in kind of the last month. And you're going to see, sort of a lot more from us there. And I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this. I've had a number of discussions on this, but I think we're still so early that marketing and attention are sort of, to me, really the number one thing you want to be delivering on. Obviously there's got to be substance underneath. But I think that we're still in that phase more than sort of the value accrual back to the token. I think a few groups kind of were launching and talking about value accrual back to the token, which we definitely agree with. But I just think that the amount of alpha that needs to be returned to the token to really move the needle, just the numbers don't pan out for kind of the realistic monetization for any subnet at this moment. But I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a tweet this morning about this exact problem. I think marketing is a problem across like every, tech product in general. The basis of this tweet was like, once a marketing and distribution channel proves its value, the reward for exploiting that channel shrinks significantly. So if you look at like the transition of marketing metas over the past digital marketing metas over the past 20 years, it's like Facebook ads, Google paid ads, all of these different metas kind of just shrink in value to where it becomes like the marginal benefit gets gobbled up really quickly. But if you're early to those metas, you reap the upside significantly, and you basically are the winners. But in today, and specifically crypto, I think that it's particularly relevant for people to just prioritize smaller channels. So smaller channels would be just like your own owned audiences, like your own newsletters, your own Discord communities, your own Telegram channels. Prioritize those small channels, curate intimate activations. So setting up small groups, small dinners, these smaller types of things that get people engaged, and then really leaning into those people who are engaged are really beneficial, and taking bigger risks. So a lot of big brands, what they're doing is like they're managing downside. And one exception to this is like Ryanair. Like they're always on top of the trend. They're always creating really good content. But for the most part, brands take, that are really large, they're managing their downside. So they don't really take many risks. But with this startup space, you can really kind of take risks. You can, kind of be really edgy and see kind of where it happens to capture like the mind share. And a lot less like group chat spamming, fake engagement, bots, giving away free money. I think that those are all just like a race to zero, to be honest. And it makes your product and your message, it dilutes the meaning significantly. So leaning into your engaged users, leaning into the people who care and resonate with your message, building them a really great experience, curating very small, intimate activations is, I think, the most net positive opportunity for you to capture the most amount of gains, especially in the early stage.
Yeah, especially with going back to your point, David, that like it's becoming interesting now on BitTensor because those early days are just so low liquidity where, prices were swinging like crazy and folks with large TAO stacks were just, propping up prices for quite a while. I think it's becoming more interesting now because it's the broader market that's deciding which subnets are interesting. And it does frustrate me when I see all these subnets doing amazing work and they're just not thinking about how to show off that great work. Because I think there are some really underrated subnets right now that deserve to be in the top 10, top 20, where they just have to do a better job of showing folks the great work they're doing. And like Brody said, it's going to take a while to build that organic growth, but it'll be worth it for those subnets for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think marketing is absolutely critical. DTAO, is a forcing function on, getting your subnet in front of the community, being really, transparent and clear with your roadmap. We're actually going to be rolling out a bot within our Discord. We haven't launched our Discord officially yet for Ready AI, but we're going to be doing that concurrently with a bot that we've, built structured data around. Another one that's updating in real time, as we have new information pop into Discord, Twitter, et cetera. So, I just think we want to be as transparent and clear with the community on what we're doing, where we're going, what we have delivered on.
Yeah, and showing the use cases, right? That's perfect. I've been telling folks for a while now that agents can be your first customer in a lot of cases. So just go and build that. Just showcase the product. So I love that. Awesome, man. This has been a lot of fun. Wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. David, really appreciate you joining us today. Where should folks go if they want to learn more about what you're working on?
Yeah, thanks, guys. This has been a lot of fun. You can check me out on Twitter at DAV Fields, and you can also check out Ready AI on Twitter or on the BitTensors Discord for now, and soon our own Discord channel coming soon.
Love that, man. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the TAO Times newsletter if you want an even deeper dive into this week's updates. And we'll see you all next week. Thanks, fellas.
Sweet.